So as I said, there's no particular fixed model. It depends really on the farmer, on the community group. Some CSAs are farmer-led, so a farmer looks at his business and said, actually, you know, I want a slightly different customer base, or I want a different quality of life. A CSA is a business. It's, you know, it's still needs to be run like a business. It still needs to be professionally run. It still needs to, you know, manage the accounts. A good CSA is not a sort of fluffy community ideal. It's a proper business, but based on a slightly different set of presumptions. So the weekly share of the harvest is literally where, rather than me saying, right, I'm going to buy a pound of carrots and a cabbage and 2 onions, I'll say I'm going to give you 15 quid a week, or however much, 20 quid depending on the size of the share, and I'll get a share of what's available that week. So if there's a glut of spinach, suddenly you'll find, you know, you've got 3 kilos of spinach in your box rather than... So in a good week you'll get a lot, in a bad week you might get a bit less, but overall you get your share. Some people have a sort of standing order. So there's a place in Scotland, Whitmuir, where they have a standing order in the shop. So they basically pay 25 quid on a direct debit every week into the shop, and then they go and spend it in the shop. And there was one person who sort of hadn't been spending it, basically built up this 200 quid credit in the shop. So they phoned them up and said, would you like to refund your thing? No, I'm going to come. It just stops me going to the supermarket. Keep it in there. I want to shop there. So it's that incentive. But for the shop, it gives them a regular income, and they know that they're getting that money from a certain number of customers. So it can be a massive bonus for cash flow, where you've got people putting some money in either at the beginning of the season or regularly. There's an orchard CSA, Dragon CSA, which again we'll come into a bit more detail, where you pay a share and you get to visit the farm, and then you get a box of goodies at the end. So that's relatively low key, low commitment, but effectively they saved their business. They were supplying into Bournemouth for the cider market, and then suddenly had, you know, a quarter of their income was guaranteed up front. And they got people coming with their farm. They ended up building a little stage and doing plays for their members, and so suddenly it became something quite enjoyable. So there was one Loxley in the northeast of England where they actually they didn't pay a grower to do it. They just all came together. They paid the rent between them. They paid for the seed, shared the work, and then just shared out the harvest. So it was a sort of fairly informal arrangement. The next one, which is supporting the farmers buying shares, that was what the community farm that I was involved in was more like. It was actually a relatively conventional box scheme model in terms of the commercial bit. It was 350 boxes and a growing operation. We raised, how much, £140,000 to buy out that business, take it on as a community-owned business. We still just carried on selling boxes. We had members. Interestingly, not that many of our members came from our box scheme customers. We thought, all these really, switched on box schemes customers, they're going to want to be CSA members. And out of that 350, 20 or 30 actually signed up in the first tranche. And other people were joining without buying the box. So there's interesting what people are motivated to invest in, and particularly for the community farm, they weren't getting a return. We said we might give you a return in 5 years if we're making enough money, but there was no guarantee of that return. They just wanted interest rates were 0.5% and the money's doing nothing in the bank. Let's use it to support something worthwhile. So that was an interesting dynamic. The second one from the bottom is perhaps one of the sort of truer forms where actually a group comes together. So Stroud CSAs like this come together, rent some land, employ a farmer, effectively outsourcing the work, and they manage it. There's a steering group of those members that manage it on a year-to-year basis, and they pay again a share and get a share back. And then there's quite a lot on the meat side where people effectively pay what it costs to produce an animal, and then get a half animal or a share of the animal at the end. So there's quite a lot of livestock CSAs like that. So I thought I'd just sort of go through maybe 3 CSAs in just a little bit more detail. So Stroud is one of the oldest CSAs. And for those of you that know Stroud, it's quite an alternative place. So it's not surprising that it started there. They now have they vary between 150 and 200 households how they supply. And again, different CSAs have different ways of allocating what they do. So they tend to have sort of shares, half shares, and family shares. Or so basically, if you're on your own, you don't want to get a massive box, and equally, if you've got a big family, you want more. So there's, you can be quite flexible about how you divide your harvest up. They rent 2 farms. They have a vegetable unit, and then they do livestock as well. So they employ 2 full-time people. They get paid a wage, they get holidays, they get a pension. Again, unusual in small-scale production. And for me, one of the big attractions of community farming, and I'll come on to it a little bit later in terms of new entrants, is farming can be quite lonely. You're out in a field all day, and I quite like being around people. Farming with other people is just a lot more fun, and you can still go off and hide in carrots if you really want to, but actually that sort of social element for a lot of people involved in CSAs is really important. And potentially is the difference between keeping going for another 10 years. So there's a Cambridge crop share is where the grower, he's long-standing organic grower, used to supply the supermarkets, got shafted like a lot of organic growers did by the supermarkets, scaled down, was supplying to a lot of local outlets, and then got approached by a CSA who wanted to start up. Said, I don't know about this CSA lot, but I guess why not? It's a potential market. And it's he says it's transformed his farm. Suddenly he's got this bunch of mates that come and camp on his farm and help him out. And one of the people's now working from him 1 day a week. And so suddenly, from a point of maybe we should be giving up, suddenly he's enjoying life again. And so that's it's not for everyone, but for certain people it can be quite interesting. I don't know if that figure actually is still right, because this case study was written 4 or 5 years ago when we were doing the project, but I think it's probably higher now. But it gives you an idea of the sort of the scale of it. And the grower Mark at Stroud has been there for 12, 13 years or something, so it's a long-standing employment for him, and it suits him. Yeah, that's that food security issue actually I think will become more important, and one of the opportunities I think for us with Brexit, and possibly for you in your situation, I don't know, is how do you ensure that you've got that commitment if you're going to start selling locally and produce locally, and having that tight relationship and that understanding I think can be beneficial. So Dragon Orchard, this was the orchard in Herefordshire. So they took over parents' farm. It was just bog standard cider apples into Palmers, 10p a kilo, and they weren't really making enough money, and they had this idea to sponsor a tree, kind of, So they come up with this business model where you pay 350 quid a year. You get to visit the farm 4 times a year if you want to. They do have apparently 1 or 2 people that have never visited the farm despite having been a member for for 10 years. They do sort of tied-in visits, so they've got someone that makes sort of apple brandies and things from their produce, so they can do a visit there and get talked to. So it's it's educational as well. They get a quarterly newsletter, and then once a year they get this big sort of hamper of cider and brandy and jams and preserves, which is probably worth about 70 quid or something, 100 quid, so they're making quite good money, especially if the people don't turn up for the tours. It's not enough on its own to survive, so they still have a cider production that, goes into mainstream supply. But this bit has sort of made the difference between it being a profitable business or not. And Canal Side, for me, is one of the really interesting ones. So this was farmer-led. The son had taken over running the farm. It's very near to Garden Organic headquarters, actually. So it was inspired a little bit by a couple of people that used to work at Garden Organic, were instrumental in setting this up. Gareth Davis, who's on the board of the CSA network, was one of them. And they started renting the land to the community group. The community group employed the farmer in the same way that Australia did. They're now in the process of selling the land to a community-owned company so that that actually is secure. Because one of the problems for CSAs, particularly on rented land, is you're still at the mercy in a way of that landlord. And we've seen a number of CSAs that have, even when they've been there for 10 years, have then kind of effectively kicked off because either the land's sold or the landlord's changed his mind. So being able to be sure that you're really there for good and you can invest and put in the infrastructure makes a big difference. So that's and they've done a separate soft fruit production on the side. So it's a really interesting model as well. And again, it really, for me, one of the big things about community supported agriculture is you get a group of people together that make the sum bigger than the whole. So the community farm, in that initial steering group and board of around 10 or 12 of us, we had the farmer who was renting us the land, we had a lawyer, we had a retailer, we had a health professional, we had a teacher, we had a grower, so we had this huge range of expertise on the group that when you're on your own, you're expected to do it all. You're the marketer, you're the grower, you've got to sort everything out, and it's tough, and actually having that range of skills can make a big difference. And often people will give that time for nothing because that's their contribution. They say, well, I can do the legal bit because that's easy for me. So you potentially get quite a lot out of that. So I thought I'd sort of finish in a way just on a couple of points. One is that just reiterating that CSA is a business model for me anyway. It's got all of the benefits of community and social enterprise and all that stuff, but actually at its heart it's still a business model. And the ones that survive and do well are the ones that have a skilled farmer or a skilled grower at the heart of them. That doesn't matter whether it was the grower's idea or whether it was the community's idea. You still need someone that knows what they're doing to run the day-to-day operation. And where we've seen them fail or not achieve success is where either a community tries to do it themselves, all on volunteer labour. It can work, but it's hard. And often what happens is it's people with experience of gardening or growing in their allotment, and suddenly they're faced with an acre or 5 acres, and I don't know what to do with it. So it's quite tough scaling up, and a lot of the workshops we did in the early days of the CSA project 8 or 9 years ago were about that scaling up and about what machinery might you need, what different kit, how much seed should you order, how do I even know how much broccoli to plant for 150 people? Normally just put a few plants in. So some of those kind of really basic stuff that the professional grower is used to dealing with. We've got a real issue in the UK of a shortage of skilled growers. So we've been running a Future Growers Apprenticeship Scheme for about 10 years now. So there's loads of people want to be growers. A good proportion of them don't have the aptitude and find that out fairly quickly. But actually a good proportion of them are really good. So we've got a really increasing cohort of people with 3-4 years experience, but we don't have very many growers with 5-10 years experience. So one of the things I'm really interested in is how do you work with the existing skilled, experienced growers to mentor those young growers. So the CSA network UK at the moment has got some money for mentoring that's trying to do exactly that, but I'm building into business models funding to bring in experienced people I think really works well, and having that fortnightly or monthly visit from your mentor to come in. And often it's just a kind of, should I be doing this? You kind of think you know what you're doing, but it's quite nice to have that reassurance. Or else someone said, no, just, and I remember when I first started growing on a bigger scale, and I was on quite heavy soil in the Cotswolds, and it was a wet spring, it was getting to March, and I put the shallots in. I've got to get them in, and I sort of went out with the plough on the wrong day, put them in and regretted it, got halfway through, it stopped, waited a week, of course, dried out perfectly, I put the next lot in and then caught up within, a week. And it's that sort of thing where actually having a mentor there would have said, just hold off. And it's some of those decisions of how you support those slightly less experienced growers to come forward. So skill farm are really important. Coherent vision is also quite important. So one of the issues with community farming is the community. And working with a group of people is not as easy as just going and doing it on your own in terms of making decisions. People have different opinions of what should be done. And I think that's, again, a reason why delegating as much of the day-to-day running of a community farm to the farmer or to the grower is really important. Supporting them, but actually, they're the ones that have to make that decision. But you still need, from the board, you still need a coherent vision of what's going on. Again, at the community farm, I don't know how many of you know Phil Horton, but he's, really inspiring grower, retailer, long-standing organic supporter. He's a very driven individual. The community farm essentially was his vision. It was his idea, and we all got very carried away by it. Actually, we then we pushed too hard. We didn't build the fertility enough in the soil right at the beginning. We took on too much, but we were all so obsessed by this vision. And about 2.5 years into it, we were really lucky to have someone called Maurice McCartney who came in as a sort of independent facilitator, and he took us all away for a day and shut us in a room. And we had a really difficult day, sort of thrashing out some really tough issues, and we came away with a much clearer vision of what we wanted, and without that I think we'd have gone under. So actually reassessing that vision and being clear about what you all want, and recognising that it's a group and that you're going to end up with something that doesn't necessarily exactly fit everything that you want to do is not always easy but important. And then the final bit is not thinking that just because you've got a bunch of members, you've got a bunch of members. In the same way that you need to find customers for a regular business, you need to find new members all the time. There's always churn. People move on, even if they're committed. People move house, jobs changes, whatever. So it's really important that you get that marketing bit on an ongoing basis as well. And Stroud is one of the few places that seems to sort of have a waiting list most of the time. Most other CSAs are always looking at how do I retain members, how do I get new members. So that right at the beginning, being clear that you need to keep doing that. And then just on the new entrants again, so we see a lot of new entrants coming in. I was talking to Brian earlier. In the 70s there was this group of pioneering organic growers and farmers, and then by the time I started 20 years ago, there were very few actually. I didn't come across people of my age, very few of my age going into it. And now there seems to be a real resurgence again. There's just loads of people in their mid to late 20s. They're all very political, very driven. They want to change the world. They want to change it through food production. And a lot of them want to work on CSAs. They're specifically chosen either to set up a CSA or to work on a CSA. So actually, potentially, running a CSA is a way of getting new blood and new talent into horticulture as well. So a big question really. I don't know Jersey, you know Jersey, but it'd be interesting to have a discussion about what you guys think and whether there are opportunities. And if you do need to know more, it's over there or it's on the card. So that's all.
Thank you very much.